Member for Morialta.
Thank you, sir. My question is to the Minister for Education. Does the government support universal availability to public preschools for all South Australian families? And with your leave and that of the House, sir, I'll explain.
Leave is sought. Is leave granted? Yes, Member for Morialta.
Thank you, sir. The Interim Royal Commission report suggests that 70% of 3-year-olds will not access their new preschool entitlements through public sites, but that will only be limited as an option to those for whom are not currently in long daycare.
Minister.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for Morialta for his very important question. And the point to which he refers from the Royal Commission's interim report, and it's important, of course, for us all to remember in this place that it is an interim report. As the Premier said, we think it is a fantastic piece of work. It does an exceptional job of making what is a very complicated area of public policy, which does have interactions from different levels of government, easy to understand, and that's, I think, important for a number of reasons, but particularly because it has been so opaque for so long that it has avoided any real kind of public scrutiny because it's been so difficult to actually understand how it works. So I want to take the opportunity that the member for Morialta's question affords me in this place, Mr Speaker, to thank the Royal Commissioner for her wonderful piece of work. Now, if I could address the nub of the question from the member for Morialta, it is around one of the interim recommendations, Mr Speaker, which is a mixed model of delivery, which would see a large portion of 3-year-old preschool delivered in long daycare, or at least non-government sites, and a comparatively smaller portion of 3-year-old preschool delivered in the existing government preschool system, where we offer 4-year-old preschool now, and of course we would need to expand that as well. But I think the point that the member for Morialta is getting at here is that does this government support the option for all South Australian families, and we are sure it'll be very, very high take-up of 3-year-old preschool. In fact, I think one of the reasons that the Royal Commissioner provides in her interim report about why she recommends the mixed model of delivery, it's two main things, Mr Speaker. One is that I think, off the top of my head, the Royal Commissioner believes that we can get to as high as 97% of 3-year-olds accessing 3-year-old preschool under a mixed model of delivery, which would see a lot of it delivered in long daycare, and that the workforce challenges, although they are still considerable under that model, I think 660 early childhood teachers, 880 educators and 120 directors to achieve that, it is still far more achievable than a model where all of 3-year-old preschool is delivered through the existing government system. So the member for Morialta's question is, do we support choice for South Australian families to be able to choose the public system instead of receiving it where they might be receiving their existing long daycare provision? And my answer is, because I asked the Royal Commissioner this question myself after we received the interim report, and there is no recommendation in there, the interim report, that says that we will be stopping families from seeking to access their 3-year-old preschool at a government site. I think one of the interim recommendations strongly suggests that we should be prioritising those families who are not currently receiving that offering in the government sites, and that is something that I think we would support, but we would not be preventing families seeking to access their 3-year-old preschool component in government preschool sites. So, of course, the question, Mr Speaker, then becomes around capacity, and there are a number of things that we can do around that. One of the ideas floated by the Royal Commission around how we might be able to create additional capacity in the government system, separate to building more preschools and employing more staff of our own, is to look at whether or not the 15 hours that is offered for 4-year-olds currently could be delivered over 2 days instead of often 2.5 days, which of course would then provide more space and more capacity in the existing system that we could then offer to 3-year-olds. So there are things we will look at, because I am, of course, a proud supporter of the public system, and I do want to make sure that we maintain the opportunity for families to have that option.
The member for Morialta and then the member for Florey. Member for Morialta.
Thank you, sir. My question is to the Minister for Education. Can the Minister explain the term progressive universalism, and is this concept consistent with the government's election commitment for universal 3-year-old preschool? With your leave and that of the House, I'll explain, sir.
Leave your sorties. Leave granted. Member for Morialta.
Thank you, sir. The Interim Royal Commission report describes its recommended model as, and I quote, progressive universalism, end quote. The government's election commitment was for, and I quote, universal 3-year-old preschool. And the minister has just confirmed that the government's model includes prioritising spaces in public preschools for some families over others.
The member for West Torrens.
House of Representatives practice says questions may not ask a minister for an expression of opinion. The Shadow Minister, the Deputy Leader, is asking the Education Minister for an opinion on a question, so he should know better.
Order. I'll hear the,
on the point of order.
I'll hear the member for Morialta on the point of order.
The Leader of the House describing something as a request for an opinion does not make it so. The question was very clearly whether the minister would explain a new term that his government has introduced, much like Kevin Rudd introduced programmatic specificity. This government has a term called progressive universalism, and I've asked him to explain it.
Order. I'm greatly aided by the member for West Torrens' contribution. I observe that it is necessarily a matter of fine judgment as to whether a question invites a minister to express an opinion, which might well be a private opinion, or rather to express a view in relation to a matter of public affairs. I'll take the matter under consideration and on a future date make a statement to the House. Minister.
Thank you, Speaker. And I thank the member for Morialta again for his question. Listen, the term to which he refers, Speaker, around progressive universalism is not a term that this government used, although it is enjoyable to be lectured by those opposite about what is progressive and what is not.
Member for Morialta. Minister has the call. The minister has the call.
But of course, Mr. Speaker, what the Royal Commissioner refers to when she uses the term progressive universalism is the rollout of universal 3-year-old preschool. And again, I would remind the House that this is an interim report. We have until the 19th of May to respond. We will respond to the Royal Commission's interim report by the 19th of May. But if I can entertain the premise of the member for Morialta's question, Mr. Speaker, just for a moment, and if we were...
Member for Morialta.
If we were, for
Premier
instance...
is called to order. Minister has the call. Minister.
If we... Thank you, Jeffrey. If we were, for instance, to accept the interim recommendation from the Royal Commission around progressive universalism on a mixed model, then certainly I think that it would meet absolutely the commitment that this party, now government, then opposition, gave before the 2022 state election, which was universal preschool for 3-year-old. And as the Premier mentioned in his answer to the question from the member for King just earlier in this place, Mr. Speaker, the timeline that is set in this interim report by the Royal Commissioner around starting that rollout from 2026, having it completed by 2032, but the large part of that rollout complete by 2029 is actually a very ambitious target. If we look at what other jurisdictions who have committed to rolling out 3-year-old preschool are doing, and that includes states like Victoria and New South Wales, then we are talking 10 years. Here we are talking 6, but a lot of that provision actually complete within 3. So I think we are more than meeting the commitment we gave to the South Australian people, that the Premier, Deputy Premier and I made to the South Australian people before the last election. But we will look very closely at those interim recommendations from the Royal Commissioner. We will respond as a government, as you would expect us to, by the 19th of May. We then have the second part of the Royal Commission to follow, and I should remind members of this House that although there has been some excellent coverage and attention and interest in the first part of the Royal Commission, the second part too is extremely important, which will look at provision of services for young people in the first 1,000 days of their lives, but also look at out-of-school hours care, provision, accessibility and quality across the state. And that is important for a number of reasons, but as the Royal Commission clearly finds, Mr. Speaker, people have been choosing to leave the public system, not for reasons of quality, but for reasons of how do they make it fit in the modern working day, when if you are a working family or a single parent, you need to go and pick up your child from preschool at 3 or 3:15, which of course just doesn't work. So I'm also very much looking forward to what we see in terms of recommendations in the final report, because although the rollout of 3-year-old preschool is kind of the key part of the election commitment, we've also made a very important commitment around what we do to ensuring that out-of-school hours care is of a consistently high quality and accessibility for all South Australian families.